All right. Hey, everyone. Joe and Dustin are here talking about what's going on in GovTech. And if you saw my last post, we did try to productize some of our insights on what's going on in the market using AI, but not as easy. Joe, good to see you.
Happy to be here.
All right. So let's talk a little bit about what we're going to do today. So we got 30 minutes. We definitely want any of your questions that you have, feel free to shoot them in the chat, or any, comments that you have as well. Do that. We're going to talk about what's going on in the market today, some of the current kind of perspectives that we've seen in GovTech. We'll talk about some of the efficiency dynamics and our focus on efficiency and kind of what we're seeing there. And then ultimately, the most important thing is, if you're in a government agency, what should you do? If you're an industry partner that supports the government agencies, what should you do? And so we're going to dig into some of those perspectives and insights as we kind of talk about that. And then we have some news at the end of this that you want to definitely hang on for. So, Joe, let's just start first with kind of from a market standpoint. I know you've been tracking this. We're expecting some record numbers this year. What's going on in GovTech?
Yeah, I think we're very optimistic in terms of where we see state and local and education, GovTech, and IT related spending going. I think if you looked at our latest market estimates that we released just a few months ago, we project that state and local related IT spend is actually going to exceed $153 billion. In fact, we're just shy of $154 billion in 2025. That's about a 6.4% increase over 2024. So it's still moving very much in the right direction, very strongly. And I think when you look thematically at what we're seeing, I think, and what you hear from us today is two things: resilience and maturity. And I think when we talk about resilience and you look at the spending, obviously you've looked at all of the pandemic related spending, COVID relief funds, infrastructure funds, you name it. With all of that funding and then the uncertainty on some of those funding streams and the expiration of those funding streams, it's interesting to note that 31 states are still anticipating a spending increase, and that's from our friends at NASPO. I mean, we're flirting with almost a 2% median growth rate there. And even with a normalization of budgets and a slight dip in general fund spending, rainy day funds are at historically strong. Just over 14% of expenditures are projected right there by the end of fiscal year 2025. So you see a lot of resilience, some padding there as well, but the market continues to look strong. And I know, Dustin, you're seeing that even on the investment front. So what are you seeing there?
Yeah, I think we're definitely seeing GovTech as a hot market segment for all types of stages of investment right now. We're seeing M&A activity. We're seeing a lot of emerging M&A activity within the space. Companies are fundraising. So there's a lot of things that are happening within the space. And as you look at what's going on from a federal standpoint, this has created renewed focus. Actually, a lot of federal-oriented contractors now pivoting resources and activities and kind of their go-to-market approaches downstream into state and local government. We expect this to be another record-setting year from an M&A standpoint within this market. So, definitely follow GovTech Biz. Things are just heating up there. And I kind of want to go back to one of the things you were talking about, Joe, too, as you look at what's going on. I mean, you're anticipating a 6.4% increase in IT spend for state and local government. And that's also on top of the fact that we were normalizing budgets due to expiring federal funds. So we were kind of getting back to normal, but still seeing record increases. And we've kind of been here before. I mean, as we look back to any other periods of economic uncertainty, even during the pandemic, agencies end up spending more on technology during those periods of time because they have to unlock greater efficiencies. And, in the case of COVID, recovery. So I think we're kind of in a similar moment now where we're expecting efficiency and innovation and all these things that agencies are focused on today to really help rocket a lot of the emphasis on technology's role in that. We know that it's not just a technology play, but this is going to be a huge area of focus. We're also tracking a lot of the executive orders and kind of the implications on state and local government. And I think the key consensus here from a policy standpoint is that things like education and public safety and cybersecurity, these responsibilities are being passed to the states. And so these are things that states will have to shore up, and they're going to need help, and they're going to need guidance. And if you're in state government now, you're dealing with this right now. You may have, you may be looking for a point of view on how to navigate the now, looking at whether it's a public-private partnership or public-public-private partnership. There's going to be a lot of emphasis on how do we go from here, but the key is to act and to move forward. And we'll talk more about that as we kind of, go forward on our time today. But let's dig into just the efficiency dynamic in itself. And I think one thing that's been interesting is efficiency and optimization has become a little bit of a partisan thing where it's really not. And I know, Joe, you and I have talked about this at length. there are mechanisms that definitely can be tied to, one side or another. Things like Doge definitely follow some of the political lines, but Doge is a mechanism to a shared outcome, right? Doge is a mechanism to optimization and efficiency. And so it's not a partisan thing. It's something that, we're seeing across the board, right? California, we've seen efficiency leaders appointed there, right? Texas has a dedicated Doge committee that was tied to the legislature. So there's different flavors of this, but don't confuse the mechanisms as the outcome. And so tell me a little bit about, what you're seeing here, Joe.
Red state, blue state, or anything in between, it doesn't really matter. I think thematically what you're seeing is that all states and localities are going to be under more pressure to deliver now. So the power is shifting back down to the states and localities for a number of the programs that you outlined, whether that's going to be education, immigration, disaster recovery and relief, and even maybe it's health and human services. That's where states are going to have to fill the gap. And I think what you're going to anticipate, and what we're going to see, and we're already seeing, is increased activity at our state houses. So prepare for your legislative leaders to be very busy drafting up their versions of how they're going to respond to this moment in time, and look for the technology opportunities. So Dustin, when you talk about Florida's efficiency efforts, Texas's efficiency efforts, or even the efforts that are happening in California, look for the technology opportunities that we're seeing there. So there are numerous technology specific opportunities that we're seeing, whether that's the use of automation, the use of AI, improvements in removing regulatory barriers and looking at new approaches to permitting, ways to reduce call volumes. All of these things we're starting to see kind of wrapped into this larger efficiency conversation.
And agencies aren't slowing down. I mean, they're moving faster than ever. And on top of everything that's going on right now across the country, you also have exponential technology entering the picture. You've got, all the stuff that's happening with AI and agentic AI. You've got agencies that are rapidly modernizing some of their systems of record. So it's been so fascinating to follow just how quickly people are moving on technology. Now, we still have challenges. We still have workforce constraints. We still have, other things that are there. So let's talk a little bit about, for the government agencies that are watching right now, what should they do? What are the kind of tactics they should be looking at in this moment?
I think I'll break it out into two ways. One would have been two things that we would have had on this list pre-Doge being a thing, and that whole movement. And that would have been what we would have expected to see this year anyways. And that would have been a greater focus on optimizing operations. So how, as a government executive, as an IT leader, how do you begin to reevaluate the total cost of ownership? How do you begin to reduce some of your legacy system technology risks, that technology debt or innovation debt, and build that new digital foundation that's going to allow you to take full advantage of AI and automation and drive hopefully those larger efficiency gains? And the second piece, and I think this was consistent with what you heard from us in 2024 and what you anticipate probably to hear from us in 2026, is continue to upskill your workforce. So agencies are facing a shortfall of north of 1 million public sector employees since 2020. So combining that opportunity and challenge with AI and task and reskilling to hopefully, create new positions and new opportunities for your workforce. Now, the other two things that I'd say are probably more specific to the environment that we find ourselves in now. And that's going to be anything related to the federal funding dynamic, whether that's going to be a grant, formula, or competitive or otherwise. We need to be preparing ourselves for new funding mechanics. And that may be that there's going to be new strings attached to a particular grant that's going to be in line with the administration's goals or priorities, but also probably and more likely a larger focus on return on investment based federal funding. And that's going to drive a whole bunch of new reporting requirements. And last but not least, it's a kind of a blast from the past. It's what we see state and local government and education do in moments when they're thrust into a challenging economic environment, or in this case, increasing responsibilities. And that is look to partner. And so that could be leveraging public-private partnerships to innovate and scale up and share risk, but also look for multi-jurisdictional opportunities as well, and maybe multi-state compacts on big issues around healthcare and education.
So now let's talk about the industry perspective, right? So governments have a ton of opportunity to kind of get ahead of the now. And I think we're seeing that across the country in our editorial. Agencies are moving on this. They're taking these new responsibilities. They're finding ways to fill the gaps. They're exploring creative partnership models. They're getting really creative in the uncertainty that's there. Now, from an industry standpoint, the first thing I'd say is don't not do anything. Like, this is the time where you need to do something. And think about where we were previously with things like the pandemic and other economic periods of uncertainty. There's a lot of noise that comes, and now's the time to really think about what is your clear point of view, rooted in a real challenge that you're helping agencies address. Like we talked about that, right? We have kind of the economic climate around government agencies. We do have the need as we think about agencies that have to do more with less, right? It's a continuous battle that we have. We know that technology spend will increase, but there's still other areas that they're down that we have to think about. How do we solve these tactical challenges that are there, as opposed to just, bringing kind of a shiny object to the table for them. So think about, what is your point of view in a sea of 800 emails that are hitting that city manager or CIO or other individual? How do you align to their priorities, their needs, their strategy, the pains that they're experiencing? Because they are real. You also want to make sure that you're being a partner as a part of this process, right? Sometimes the best sales tactic right now is just to bring resources to the table and help people understand how others are navigating this, or how you're working with others to solve some of these very tangible challenges. We know AI has created so many opportunities right now. And, Joe and I get all kinds of things, every day there's a new tool that's out there. But, don't focus just on the shiny object dynamic. Focus on the outcomes that you're helping agencies achieve that are aligned to their purpose. So definitely avoid kind of the shiny object syndrome. I think, agencies are also looking for knowledge, right now, and capacity gaps. So, how do you help them deal with some of the new responsibilities they have with cybersecurity? How do you help them think about some of the new implications of dealing with, managing some of this large scale infrastructure? But I think one of the biggest things that I've seen is you have to also think about what may be holding them back. And what I mean by that is there's no shortage of people that have the funding, that have the time and availability and the willingness to do large scale projects and to work on, kind of moving something into the future. The challenge often comes down to workforce and how much they want to overwhelm their existing team. So you need to think about kind of, how do you make it easy for someone to actually implement your technology or service? I mean, for example, if you're doing a large scale ERP implementations, this is the time to focus on simplicity and what you can do for them, not just the notion of it's going to be magical. If you're in management consulting, this is not the time to not say anything. This is the time to double down and focus on the real challenges, the efficiency challenges, how you focus on optimization. And again, we've been here before. I think as Joe and I looked back at some of the other major kind of aspects of our market activity with the pandemic and other things, and there's a great amount of needs, the industry has rallied. This is an incredible market, a very resilient market. And we're at that point now where the industry is rallying, but we need to think about, and you need to think about, what is your message? How do you simplify it? How do you make it accessible? How do we share knowledge and best practices and learnings across the country in the most accessible form? Joe, I mean, what else are you seeing here as you think about kind of the industry dynamic?
Well, I loved your opening one, which was like, don't not do something. And I think that we have industry partners that service both markets, federal and state and local. Some, like you mentioned, that are federal now that are looking at state and local. And I think you have to understand that these markets are very different. So that challenging era in federal government may be creating a massive opportunity in the state and local government space. And I loved your perspective on the service consultants and the management consultants, and exactly that. Now's the time to double down, because your state houses are going to be busier than ever. You're going to need to stay aligned with their priorities. We've seen it. We've seen it on the tech front. We've seen a massive amount of bills, something like just shy of 240 technology-related bills in 46 states are passing through. Obviously, very busy on the AI front and cyber and data privacy, but look for this to continue. I mean, in response to those legislative shifts, education, immigration, justice and public safety, look for states and localities to respond to this moment in time, and that'll create ample opportunities here. I think that you also want to be aware that there are messages that are going to resonate horizontally, right? And that could be on ROI, on efficiency or optimization. That'll work in Texas, that'll work in California, that'll work coast to coast. And then there are going to be other times when that message is going to have to pivot. And the message in Texas with Dustin may look a lot different than it does in California here where I'm at. You may be kind of conceptually talking about the same concept, but in a very different tone and way. And I think what you're going to have to do is navigate this marketplace, understand that fragmentation and challenges is going to exist on the policy front from how one state is tackling AI or tackling data privacy, but that you need to be out there thinking about it holistically, driving home a message of clarity and interoperability and showing up as a partner. And I think now is the time to double down on state and local government, because this is a massive, massive opportunity that your customers are going to have to respond to. Whether they're red or blue, it's going to be a very, very big deal in 2025.
And if you don't double down, someone else will. And I think, one of the other things that's interesting about moments like this is constraint breeds innovation. Mm-hmm. And so, yes, there are real constraints that exist in the market. There are real challenges that these agencies need help with. There are real things that we're dealing with as a market that can be unlocked through partnership. And I think right now, think about how we can usher in the future. Think about this unprecedented moment and colliding technologies that are hitting state and local government agencies across the country, and how we can partner to kind of rethink the way that we deliver government services, the way that we serve the public. And so I think it's an incredible opportunity. We know that efficiency and innovation are going to be hot topics. As GovTech's covered, the state of the state addresses, we started to see this is a theme. And again, DOGE is a federal dynamic that is a mechanism to a shared outcome that as a country, everyone is pushing towards. And that's optimizing what we have and doing more with less and focusing on innovation. And this is something that you as public servants that are watching have been doing day in and day out, every day you come to work. And we applaud those efforts. And one of the things that GovTech is doing just to try to help connect the dots is similar to what we've done in the pandemic prior, is we're excited to launch today a new government efficiency initiative that is available at govtech.com/efficiency. And the premise here is to not just curate coverage on what's going on in the market, but to curate actions. And so we have an amazing government efficiency initiatives tracker that is popping up across the country that you can see what specific states are doing as it relates to government efficiency and innovation. You can see things that are related to DOGE at the federal level. Our Nikki Davidson from GovTech has done a tremendous job of just staying on the beat of what's happening, and this will continue to be dynamically updated. In addition, one of the most important things, just like we did during the pandemic, we know that you all have resources, you have things that you're doing, you have programs that are in place. So whether you're a government agency or a private sector company, we want to know, curate, then expose those best practices. So if you're an agency, tell us, do you have a new department initiative? Do you have new staff hires that are tied to this? Are you doing things relevant to it that we should know about? Same thing if you're a company and you've got resources that are here, whether they're products to aid efficiency or ideas or resources that are there, we want to know about that so that we can expose that to the wider GovTech community. You're going to see a lot more here on kind of government efficiency, from use cases, research, interviews, and tools that we'll be exposing to the wider market. So we're excited for those of you on LinkedIn Live to give you kind of a preview of this tool that is launching today on government efficiency. And Joe, I know you and I have a little bit of a role here as well, so let's talk about that.
Yeah, no, we're super excited. So Dustin and I will be personally curating this section for the wider GovTech community. And you'll see some new stuff like Dustin mentioned about the research and use cases and interviews, but also we're going to be taking advantage of AI to be driving timely analysis, looking at all of the executive orders that continually flow out, both at the federal level and down into states, to help you unpack what this means to you, what it means to your organizations. But I think what excites me the most is exactly what we've talked about. We've been here, we've been doing government efficiency for a long time. Those of you that are in the GovTech readership and in the e.Republic readership at large, this is your core. Every day, public servants are showing up and going, I know how to make this agency, this department, this process just a little bit better. And we want to shine a bright light on all of those best practices. And that's what excites me about our opportunity to have a role in curating this daily.
And whether it's ideas or things that you're already working on, we want to give a platform to that, because we know that we can learn from each other and we can spread this knowledge around the country and collectively benefit from it. So I think with that, we'll transition to, it looks like we have some questions here in the queue. So let's show the first one here, kind of relevant to how the city states can create nodes that will be critical in meeting some of the gaps created by the administration theme. So I'll have to read that specific post, Shelley, but I appreciate you calling that out. I do think as it relates to creating nodes in state and local government, this is a great opportunity, and we see this emerging as a theme to rethink public-private partnerships. Mm-hmm. And so, P3s are not a new thing, and P4s, public-private partnerships, are emerging as well. This is a great time for that. It's also an important time to think about that, because we know some of the mechanics on funding will change. Some of the funds that are competitive grant-based kind of mechanisms will start to look at impact and how large the impact is, what the return on the investment is. And so we think not only will these vehicles create partnerships where agencies can better connect and leverage, learnings from themselves, it will also create more of a competitive way to stand out in grant funding and other types of funds that may have mechanics that shift over time. Joe, I'm curious to get your thoughts on this as well.
I think similarly, I think that's where that multi-state, compact can come in. We've seen those be a pretty popular mechanism in the past, whether that's been around something like 911 modernization, but also big scale societal issues like education and healthcare. And I think that's an opportunity where you could have like-minded states build a multi-state compact to address improving healthcare outcomes or educational outcomes where they have alignment, share resources, share funding, but a common unified vision.
Right. Here's a question that just came into my LinkedIn messages. What's the best way to build trust if I'm a new company in the market at this time? That's a great question, because we have a playbook for that specific topic. Trust. There's three elements that kind of go into it. One, you've got to have some demonstrable market traction. So back to the efficiency theme. What are you doing today to drive efficiency, optimization, outcomes? Make it actionable. Make it something that people can replicate. Make it still this idea. Have something that's there. Brand awareness, right? There's a million different things that are out there that are hitting inboxes across the country. So you do need to kind of tie some of this into making your brand aware and making it a safe thing that people are acclimated with. But the most important thing that I think often people forget is a point of view. Why you? Why now? Why this moment? Why this technology or service? And again, it all goes back to solving the problems that are at hand, solving the tactical things that are there, and building a point of view around not how great things are, how great your technology is, but the problems that you've worked with agencies to solve and how you can unlock real value for them. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there. Joe, interested in your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to go with point of view, but you stole that one. So what I do is build on that. I think what's great about the public sector, if you're new to it, is the amount of intelligence that's available to you that's publicly available. So you can go in, review their strategic plans, review their budget documents, review their priorities, make sure that you're speaking their language in the right ways. And I think if you align up to their priorities, then not only are you going to have a point of view, but you're going to have a point of view that's going to resonate.
All right, we got more questions that are flowing in now. So let's go with one from our friend Corey. Hey, Corey, good to see you. Are there ways to incentivize cross-agency collaboration and data sharing to power these cross-state or jurisdiction impacts and partnerships? We've seen a lot around procurement, but how can we make this the next leap? I think this is a good question. I do think that we need to start to explore incentives. So if you're in state government, this is one where when you think about the flow of funds and how responsibility and some of these congressionally appropriated funds are going to flow into your hands for allocation, perfect opportunity to start to think about how to incentivize and make this part of the requirements or the competitive nature of how some of those grant funds flow that are in your own hands and control. Counties have a similar seat, right? Even large metros have some ability here to start to build some precedent here. Joe, your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I think that we've seen these efforts. I mean, part of it is just breaking down some of the common misconceptions and beliefs that prevent that collaboration. I mean, every time we showed up in a health and human services conversation, the number one thing you'd hear was, oh, we can't do this because of HIPAA. And you had to kind of walk in and educate and break down some of those silos. So part of it, I think, is just educating that where those barriers are they actually barriers or are they just hurdles? And so exposing them, getting them out in the open, I think helps smooth that out. But I think here is an opportunity where there's going to be a higher willingness to get things done. Frankly, Dustin, you brought up the pandemic, but go back to 2008, 2009. when we went through the recession. What we saw there was a massive uptick in multi-jurisdictional collaboration because everyone understood that they couldn't do it alone. And I think, depending on how this goes, we could see that same approach here going forward.
All right, I got a question here from an upscaling perspective. Investments here could easily get overlooked given the focus on efficiency. How do you see government agencies taking an innovative approach to this upskilling? This is a great question because I think this is a fundamental thing that we cannot let lose sight of. This is something we really have to focus on. And Joe and I have been spending a lot of time and energy on AI change management, specifically related to upskilling. So I think that, yes, we need to make sure this is woven in. How we've seen agencies approach this today when they're procuring some of these tools, like some of the general purpose technologies and transformation technologies with AI, writing in change management and upskilling as an aspect of what that industry partner is responsible for and accountable to, making sure it's part of the scope of the engagement and that it doesn't just fall to someone to think about later. Building it up front in the process is key. We've dealt with this even within our own company, making sure that we think about these types of things prior to pulling the trigger on all of them will help us ensure that the people that are most impacted by it are helping design that future state for themselves and that they're a part of reshaping their own trajectory. Joe, I know that we can talk another 30 minutes on this one alone, but what do you see?
Real quick, I think when we're talking about government efficiency, we're not losing sight that we also want an effective government. So it's not just the sake of coming in and reducing costs just for that sake. From a GovTech perspective, from a governing perspective, we're very much motivated and interested in ensuring that we have an effective government that's still here to deliver day in and day out.
All right, let's go back. I think there's a couple more questions here. Shelley had a follow-up related to P3s. Will they work for things like disaster planning and response or healthcare? We're shifting from the feds, might go to state and city, county. I think we're going to see an evolution of P3s and P4s in new areas that we haven't seen before. I think this is an opportune moment. I mean, look at cybersecurity. We've seen defunding of the MSI SACs. We've seen CISA, potentially having some major budgetary cuts as it relates to this. So we're going to have to get really creative at the state and local level as we think about how we're going to work together to pull resources to deal with some of these challenges. It doesn't mean these existing structures are going away. It just means the connectivity layers on ultimately who's leading and who's funding those are going to kind of change hands here, and states are going to take a much more active role in the process. Joe, any other thoughts on this one?
I'm particularly optimistic about healthcare and education. There's a lot of work to be done in that disaster recovery and response because that, dollars and cents wise is a big investment that someone's got to pick up. So a lot of effort will go there. And let's see what else.
All right, Corey had another one here: perceived versus actual barriers. Anything stand out for you here?
I think that's that whole HIPAA conversation that we were talking about earlier. Sometimes you get locked in a mindset around something be a barrier, but it's not truly that. It's just what we've kind of, what's always been, always will be until someone shows up and changes the dynamic.
Absolutely. And there's definitely a lot of things here. I mean, I think as we look at the economy, for example, is a perceived limiting factor for agencies today. And yes, there's real realities on the ability to borrow money and debt and other things for agencies that are going into large scale capital infrastructure projects. But it doesn't take away from the fact that they still have to provide services, and they need actually more so now to find ways to do that more effectively with limited resources, staff, trying to, we're just getting kind of back to pre-pandemic levels from a workforce standpoint. So people say, oh, well, that's great, you're back to where you were before, but the needs actually aren't pre-pandemic. They're actually greater now. And there's all kinds of new specialization that's required as we think about this unprecedented moment of now we're bringing in AI and we need explainability and bias and other types of things. So we're going to have to get creative on how we handle some of that. And it's going to take a partnership approach between agencies and industry partners. We're going to have to just, do that. And we're going to have to share what's working and what's not working as a part of that. So these are great questions here. How do courts and other county-based functions fit into the conversation? Also a good question. Corey gets the gold stars today for lobbing some good ones over the fence here. I mean, counties are a hub and spoke model for rolling out some of these things. They have functions that often interface with cities within their ultimate boundaries. And so there's opportunities for efficiency just in the nature of some of the county services that are rendered and some of those direct interface lines today that may be paperwork driven when it comes to campaign finance reports or things like that. Joe, any specific thoughts on this one before we wrap?
Probably less specific on the courts, but I think I would look specifically at human services, since that's largely where a lot of these programs are administered, and the downstream impacts to counties in particular, and education for that matter. So they are very much going to be an active recipient and participant of this conversation.
Well, we promised 30 minutes. We will be doing more of these as well. We hope it's been helpful today just to kind of dig into this. We want to start a conversation. We'd love your questions. Connect with us on LinkedIn, send them over. We'll definitely make sure we have some time to feature them. And I think the most important kind of narrative for both government and industry is don't not do anything right now. Like, this is not a time to pause and to kind of wait and see how the dust settles on the EOs. This is a time to dig in and to really focus on how we can reimagine the way things are done. The net is we're going to have a lot more responsibility at the state and local level as it relates to this. So it's our future to design. And the key is, who's going to do it? Are we going to wait and let someone else do it for us? Or are we going to dig in now and leverage this moment to reimagine what's possible within state and local government? So Joe, as always, fun to join you. We'll be back. I will work on my book collection over here. You got to keep up with Joe and my reads here. We'll make sure that we definitely keep you apprised of what's on our radar. And thanks everyone for carving some time out on LinkedIn with us today. We'll see you next time.